In the late 1960s, as the Cold War cast its heavy shadow across the world, a strange name began to circulate in hushed tones among soldiers and officers stationed near Pennsylvania. That name was Raven Rock. It wasn't on any official maps. No signs marked its location. Yet the place existed, buried deep inside a mountain, swallowing secrets the world was never meant to see. The first accounts came from a young soldier, barely 25 years old, assigned to night guard duty near the secondary entrance of the compound. He had no idea what exactly he was guarding. All he knew was that the traffic there was unusual, convoys of trucks arriving at odd hours, black-tinted cars pulling in and disappearing, men in civilian clothes escorted by grim-faced officers. One night, he heard something that shook him to his core. It wasn't the hum of machinery or the roar of generators. It was a deep, guttural sound, like a low bellow, that seemed to come from within the mountain itself. The ground trembled beneath his boots. For a moment, he thought the entire mountain was alive, breathing in the darkness. The sound grew louder, almost unbearable. And soon, other guards confessed they had heard it too. Some admitted they heard human voices, muffled cries coming from the depths below. One swore he saw a massive shadow slip past the metal door before it slammed shut. Another claimed that once, while the guards were rotating shifts, he glimpsed a red glow leaking from the cracks beneath the underground gate, as if something strange was happening behind those sealed steel doors. The unease spread among the troops, but no one dared ask questions. Orders were orders. Still, the young soldier could not shake the feeling that something monstrous was hidden within Raven Rock. He began to secretly keep notes in a small journal, recording truck schedules, strange noises, odd sightings, and the faces of strangers who didn't belong to any branch of the military he knew. Then came the night that changed everything. It was storming heavily, rain lashing the mountain, thunder splitting the sky, when the massive steel door suddenly burst open. A group of men stumbled out, their clothes stained with blood, shouting for medical help. Behind them, for only a few seconds, the soldier saw something that seared itself into his memory. A figure, taller than any man, its skin deathly pale, its eyes glowing a faint yellow, stood in the shadows of the chamber. The creature pushed against the closing door with inhuman strength, letting out a roar that made the guards stagger backward in fear. Just as quickly, the officers shoved it back, sealing the door with desperate force. The soldier never forgot what he saw. And he wasn't alone. Whispers spread among others stationed nearby, but those who spoke too much were swiftly silenced. Some faced military trials for breaching confidentiality. Others simply disappeared. But the young soldier survived, and he kept telling his story, though only to those who dared to listen. Years later, a second witness emerged. This time it was a civilian contractor hired to perform maintenance work in Raven Rock's labyrinthine tunnels. During one shift, a sudden power outage plunged him into darkness. As he searched for a way out, he heard heavy footsteps echoing behind him. When the lights flickered back on, he found himself standing before a glass containment cell glowing with eerie blue light. Inside was a creature. Massive. Shackled with thick chains. Its wide, unblinking eyes stared into his, and in that instant he knew this was no animal. It was intelligent, aware, and filled with hatred. The contractor never spoke of it publicly until years later, when rumors about Raven Rock began to surface. But his testimony confirmed the soldier's fears. Raven Rock was not merely a command bunker or nuclear shelter, as the public was led to believe. Something else was hidden inside, something dangerous, unnatural, and alive. By the early 1970s, Raven Rock had grown into something far larger than an ordinary underground base. Officially, it was a continuity of government facility, a place where leaders could retreat in case of nuclear war. But to those who served there, the story was very different. The soldiers who rotated through guard duty began to notice subtle changes in procedure. Entire sections of the complex became restricted zones, guarded by men who wore no name tags and carried strange, heavy rifles unlike standard issue. Workers were ordered never to look directly at certain corridors. Entire tunnels were sealed off overnight, the sound of welding echoing through the mountain. And always, the noises continued. Some said they heard the sound of chains dragging against metal. Others swore they smelled burning flesh drifting faintly through the ventilation system. More than one guard reported voices, pleading, screaming, begging for release, echoing down the dark shafts late at night. The higher-ranking officers dismissed it as paranoia. But then, one night in 1972, the paranoia became reality. A young technician, tasked with repairing the communication grid, accidentally wandered into one of the sealed sectors. He thought he had taken a wrong turn until he noticed the walls, lined with thick glass panels, each one fogged over from the inside. As he wiped one clear, his blood ran cold. A face stared back at him. Human but distorted. The skin stretched tight, the eyes bloodshot and unblinking. The creature inside the glass let out a soundless scream, pounding its fists against the barrier until cracks began to spread. The technician ran, but he was caught by armed guards before he could escape the sector. He was never seen again. His colleagues were told he had been reassigned, but everyone knew what really happened. By then, whispers among eyewitnesses had grown darker. These were not simple experiments, not animals in cages. Some claimed they were once human, subjects who had been taken from prisons, hospitals, even off the streets. Changed. Altered. Used for something beyond comprehension. One of the strongest eyewitness accounts came from a man named Thomas Green, a civilian electrician who had been contracted to upgrade the underground power network. He later confessed to a close friend, who recorded his testimony before Green vanished without a trace. Green described entering a cavernous chamber, far beneath the known levels of the complex. There, rows of enormous tanks filled with thick, greenish liquid stood connected to humming machines. Inside the tanks floated bodies, not dead, not alive, suspended in a state of unnatural preservation. They weren't corpses, Green whispered in the recording. They opened their eyes. They followed me with their eyes. He swore one of them even pressed a hand against the glass, leaving streaks of blood behind as it slowly turned its head. Green left Raven Rock the next day, refusing to return despite threats from officials. 2 weeks later, his car was found abandoned at the edge of a forest. He was never found. By the mid-70s, Raven Rock had become a place of dread for anyone stationed nearby. Rumors of accidents spread, guards mauled in restricted sections, screams echoing through steel corridors, doors torn from their hinges by something far stronger than a man. And then came the blackout. In late 1976, the entire complex lost power for nearly an hour. Official reports claimed it was a minor electrical fault. But witnesses told a very different story. A soldier stationed at the West Tunnel exit swore he saw dozens of figures running through the darkness, pale, twisted, inhuman shapes scrambling for the surface. Floodlights flickered back on just as the order was given to fire. The tunnel filled with gunfire, screams, and the stench of burning flesh as the creatures were cut down. Not all of them were destroyed. Some made it out. For weeks afterward, reports came from nearby towns of livestock mutilated, of strange figures seen at night, of children whispering about monsters lurking at the edge of the woods. The military moved swiftly, sweeping the area, confiscating evidence, silencing civilians. Yet the stories never fully disappeared. Those who lived through that night inside Raven Rock never forgot what they saw. And the more they spoke, the clearer it became, something terrible had been unleashed. By the late 1970s, Raven Rock had turned into a nightmare hidden beneath the mountains of Pennsylvania. The facility was supposed to guarantee the survival of government leaders during war, but to those who worked inside, it had become something much darker. The whispers of experiments, the sightings of distorted human figures, the screams in the night, all of it was building toward a breaking point. The official story was that Raven Rock continued to operate smoothly, But inside, the situation had spiraled beyond control. The creatures, once human, were multiplying, their mutations becoming unpredictable. Guards reported that some could withstand bullets, others moved with terrifying speed, while a few emitted a high-pitched sound that shattered glass and left men clutching their bleeding ears. Witness accounts grew harder to silence. One former medic, Sergeant Harold Davis, later confessed in secret letters to his wife that he had been forced to tend to patients who were beyond saving. In one letter he wrote, "Their skin splits open like paper. They look at you with eyes that are still human, begging you to end it. But if you get too close, they change, like something else takes over their body. I can't describe it without shaking. It's not medicine we're practicing down here. It's cruelty." Davis never returned home. His letters were intercepted, but a copy survived, smuggled by his wife into the hands of a local journalist. That journalist disappeared before the story could be published. By 1979, the commanders at Raven Rock were running out of options. Too many incidents, too many escapes. Entire wings of the complex had been welded shut, but even steel barriers were not enough. The monsters inside were evolving. Rumors swirled among lower-ranking soldiers that some officers were negotiating with private defense contractors, offering to sell samples of the creatures for weapons research. And then came the fire. On a stormy night in October, alarms blared through Raven Rock. Witnesses said the ground shook as if an earthquake had struck. Power flickered in and out, plunging entire sections into darkness. Soldiers rushed through smoke-filled corridors, some shouting that containment had failed, others firing blindly into the shadows. What truly happened that night has never been officially confirmed. But survivors tell of a breach deep in the lower levels, where the oldest, most dangerous test subjects were kept. According to one eyewitness, the creatures poured out like a flood, their bodies twisted, their screams echoing off the steel walls. Gunfire erupted in every direction. Explosions shook the mountain. One survivor, Corporal James Whitaker, later told his brother, "It wasn't a battle. It was a massacre. We weren't fighting to win. We were fighting to keep the things from reaching the surface." Whitaker claimed entire teams were sacrificed, ordered to stay behind and hold the line while blast doors sealed shut, trapping them inside. He said he barely escaped through a ventilation shaft, his hands shredded from crawling through jagged steel. When the smoke cleared, Raven Rock was in ruins. The official report claimed there had been a containment accident involving classified materials. A handful of survivors were quietly reassigned. Others were discharged, sworn to secrecy under threat of prison, or worse. Families who asked questions were met with silence. But outside the mountain, strange reports continued. Hikers in the surrounding forest described hearing unnatural howls at night. Farmers spoke of livestock vanishing without a trace. Children whispered of pale figures seen in the trees. Locals began to call the area cursed. And though the government rebuilt Raven Rock in the years that followed, turning it once again into a top-secret command center, the rumors never died. Eyewitnesses swore that the tunnels deep below had been abandoned, sealed forever with concrete. But others insisted they still heard noises, chains dragging, doors slamming, screams echoing from beneath the ground. Today, officials dismiss the stories as conspiracy theories. They claim Raven Rock is nothing more than an underground bunker, a relic of the Cold War, still operational but ordinary. Yet the survivors, the few who dare to speak, tell a different story. They say Raven Rock was never just about continuity of government. It was about something else entirely. Something that went wrong. Something that still lurks beneath the mountain. And late at night, when the wind carries the sound across the ridges of Pennsylvania, some swear they can still hear it, the muffled cries of those who were left behind, and the unearthly wails of the creatures that should never have existed. The truth remains buried in stone and shadow. But those who know, those who saw with their own eyes, can never forget. Raven Rock was meant to protect humanity from annihilation. Instead, it may have unleashed a terror far worse than the war it was built to survive.